We're joined by Roby Barrett, a senior fellow for the Joint Operations University. Thank you so much, Dr. Barrett, for joining us on this very sad day with this tragic news. How do you think this latest video will affect response from the U.S. and key allies?
I actually think that the U.S. and key allies have already decided on the path they're going to take and what their actions are going to be vis-a-vis ISIS. And so I don't expect to see any dramatic difference. I mean, it's terribly unfortunate that this has happened to Mr. Haynes, but I think this is hardly something that we should not have expected, given what's been going on, given the decisions that have been made over the last few weeks.
So you do not expect for Britain to take a stronger stand. We know that they've aided the Iraqi military, obviously the Peshmerga, but they have not stood by airstrikes by the U.S. yet. You don't expect this to affect that decision in any way?
Well, it may. I mean, but the British probably aren't going to join in. I mean, it will be a kind of a second to what we've already decided to do. And so I don't really see it changing anything on the ground. And in fact, if you put British aircraft, if the British decided they wanted to put aircraft, I'm not sure that makes sense because it'll just complicate what's already underway.
I see. Do you think that this group right now, the Islamic State, where they stand right now, are a real threat to the United States?
You know, in singular operations, any group could be a threat to the United States. But as far as a real threat, if you mean a strategic threat, absolutely not. They're potentially a serious security problem, and we'll deal with those as we always have. And it also is, realistically speaking, we've been very, very fortunate not to have had any major attacks on U.S. soil. Now, we've had incidents. We've had the Boston Marathon, we had the attempt at Times Square, et cetera, but nothing on the scale of 9/11. And so I think we've done pretty well in the last almost decade and a half now, or the last 12 years. So, but might they attempt to attack us at home? Yes. Are more Americans at risk from sympathizers to the group? Yes. Is there anything really we can do about it if we're actually going to deal with this ISIS problem and the threat that it poses not only to the region and the instability of the region? Really, we could just keep doing what we're doing right now, security-wise, be a little bit more focused, and at the same time carry on with what we've got planned.
Mr. Barrett, Sean Caleb's here. Two-point question. There are only about 31,500. I say only. That's significantly more than the CIA had expected until recently. But they haven't faced a united front. They fought areas in Syria. They fought areas in Iraq. Sorry about that. What is it going to do to basically weed these people out of that area? And secondly, is it going to take U.S. or other coalition boots on the ground to do this?
Well, I think realistically, looking at it and looking at the political environment and what the U.S. public is willing to stand for and not stand for, we had 160,000 troops in Iraq and we didn't weed them out, right? We cut them down, we reduced them, we brought Sunni allies in, we did all sorts of creative things, but the problem didn't go away. And this problem is not going to go away. The real fear here was that ISIS would actually expand its control enough to form some semblance of a state and a new entity that we had to deal with that would provide a safe haven for all sorts of terrorist activity. And I think that's really what the target is right here. But stop and think about AQAP in Yemen. We have been trying to deal with AQAP now for quite some time, and we've had a lot of success. But as far as AQAP and its sympathizers going away, they haven't. There are some fundamental issues here, particularly with the Sunni population in Syria and Iraq, that we're not going to solve, no matter how many airstrikes or whatever actions we take, because they basically feel, the Sunnis in Iraq, who rules Iraq basically for 350 years, feel like they've been disenfranchised, whether they're ISIS or whether they're from some other group or former Baathists or just tribal leaders that fought with us in the surge and then felt abandoned after we left and the Maliki government went after them. And that doesn't even speak to the problem of Syria, where the Sunnis have been fighting since, the 80s or late 70s against, at one time or another, against the Assad regime there. And they feel that we've really let them down a year and a half ago. So there's all sorts of problems here. And people have been driven basically to the wall. And the more radical elements, I expect to even get for them to get even more outrageous in the near term as a backlash against what they see as us once again involving ourselves on the side of their enemies.
And Mr. Barrett, because ISIS is so barbaric, so heartless, so cutthroat, when I was in Iraq just a couple weeks ago, a lot of people were simply terrified about this group. They got within 35 kilometers or so of Erbil, and a lot of people just left that town. They are slowly coming back, but how important is this just fear factor that that group is able to generate?
Well, it's very, very important, particularly in areas where the Syrian government and the Iraqi government have shown themselves to be totally incapable of controlling. And basically, the coalitions that we established back in the 07, 08, 09 timeframe have all fallen apart, due in large part to the Iraqis themselves. And the Syrians never really existed. The grievances in Syria go back to 1982 when I'm serving in the Middle East and Hama, where Assad massacred somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 Sunni men, women, and children, including Muslim Brotherhood fighters that were opposing his regime. So I don't really see the situation changing radically here in the near term as we attempt to knock down the capability of ISIS to take and hold territory, and perhaps make inroads with this unwieldy coalition that they have of some people who are a coalition of convenience in some respects, where some people really aren't necessarily hardcore ISIS, but they're willing to accept ISIS leadership and let ISIS do as they want in a situation where they feel like their own rights and situation has been ignored. So it's going to be very, very complicated, and I don't see much changing in the short term.
Dr. Roby Barrett, thank you so much, live from Fargo. We appreciate your time and insight.